This week on Quality Digest Live, we talked to Jim Benson, CEO of Modus Cooperandi, and Charlie Whitney, Vice President and General Manager of Turner Construction Company. And we're going to talk about standard work, what it is and how it's used, and we will look at how standard work is being used in the construction industry. You want to find out more about that, so come back in 30 seconds. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live. QDL is your weekly look on who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest. And as I just said, joining us today are Jim Benson, CEO of Modus Cooperandi, and Charlie Whitney, Vice President and General Manager of Turner Construction Company. And we are going to be talking about standard work, and in particular how it works in a real-world environment. One we don't talk about much on this show, which is the construction industry. Hi, Jim and Charlie. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Dirk.
Hey, thanks.
Pleasure to be here today, Dirk.
Jim, before we get going, before we kind of start talking to Charlie about using standard work in a highly variable environment, I should say, the construction industry, why don't you just tell us a little bit about standard work and what it is? It's a term that's kind of bandied around a lot. Some people may understand it, some may not.
So just strictly speaking, standard work is being able to repeat a set of steps and get the same result each time. In situations like the office or like knowledge work or construction, where you have a high degree of variation, standard work tends to relate more to how you predictably react to certain situations. And so what we're going to talk about today is how Charlie was able to work with his staff to approach problem solving and approach anomalies in work from a more standard or predictable way.
So standard work isn't just a procedure necessarily. It's not like just writing a procedure, this is how you do something and that's it.
Right. So I like the word procedure. In what you just said, because there's a difference between a process, which is how we agree that something is going to get done, and procedure, which is more of a checklist of the exact steps that you will take to do something. When you're dealing with safety, which is like job one on a construction site,
sure.
When you're dealing with quality, when you're dealing with constant shipments, people moving around, different trades moving in different directions at different times, it's very difficult to say, I'm working on today's checklist. You have to have a certain degree of situational awareness. So it ends up being more of a process than a procedure.
Oh, okay, so thanks for setting that up a little bit. I think most of the people in our industry, we think of maybe standard work, and you're right, it's a manufacturing plant. You do the same thing the same way. You come in, you punch in your clock, you sit down at your station and do the same thing that you do every day maybe, and whereas, so kind of the process and procedure may kind of become kind of melded into one thing. But in construction, as we're going to talk to Charlie here in a little bit, yeah, who knows what the heck's going to happen when you show up for work in the morning, right?
Exactly. Is that there's enough variation in the relationships, there's enough variation in the activities, there's enough variation in just the situations that you find yourself in each day, that you need to be able to govern yourself by your own professional judgment, which doesn't mean that there's no place for standard work. But what it means is that when we're setting up different types of standard work, we need to recognize that they need to be flexible, they need to react well to change, and to the extent possible, they need to lessen the amount of change that those actions themselves create.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm going to let you introduce Charlie Whitney here. He's somebody you've been working with to implement standard work on really large construction sites. Turner is a pretty large company. Why don't you kind of introduce Charlie and maybe what was going on over there at Turner, and then we'll talk to Charlie a little bit and see how that all worked out for him.
Right. Well, so what I would say to kick this off is that I've worked with a lot of companies that have had a lot of employees, and they've had a valuation that's somewhere around a half to a third of the cost of one of the buildings that Charlie's group builds. And he's building dozens of buildings at a time. So they are dealing with numbers of employees, complexity of job, and just dollars that most of us couldn't even dream of. My quick introduction for Charlie would be that Charlie is a general manager in the New York business unit of Turner. Turner is a multinational corporation that literally builds buildings worth tens, hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars. After that, I'll just turn it over to you, Charlie, and you can you can introduce yourself.
Hey, Charlie. Yeah, Charlie, why don't you just introduce yourself and maybe what you do at Turner, and you know, how many jobs are you responsible for, job sites or employees, however best kind of describes your job there.
Sure, Dirk. Good afternoon. So again, I'm Charlie Whitney. I'm a vice president and general manager for Turner Construction, and that means I have overall operational responsibility for our New York business unit. We'll currently do we're projecting about $2.4 billion worth of work in place this year. We do it one brick at a time, one metal stud at a time. We're building projects all throughout the 5 boroughs. That's my area of responsibility. We have 46 offices around the country. We also have an international presence, as Jim also mentioned a moment ago. We do renovations. We do buildings from ground up. We're in healthcare, commercial office buildings, higher ed. We're in airports. We do hospitality, cultural, airports. We like to work in virtually every single product type. Helps us maintain a constant flow of work no matter what the economy is or where the market's shifting.
So as Jim was saying, and I kind of alluded to, there is nothing standard, so to speak, about the kind of work that you do, or the kind of the shifting jobs that may be available or that may be going on any job site on any given day, right? I mean, it's the construction industry is by its very nature, I guess, chaotic, for lack of a better word. Would that be an appropriate term to use, chaotic?
It's probably a good place to start. Every project we do is a unique business enterprise. So we're going to talk about a job today. It's a $280 million renovation project. It's a repositioning of a 60-year-old building. Like every other job, a unique team was assembled to build this building, or reposition this building. The architect was unique to this project. New structural engineer, new mechanical engineer, new client, and then even from Turner's standpoint, you would build a team to build the building. And then to take that another level, we actually go out and we competitively bid all the subcontracts. So you always have a unique assemblage of subcontractors on every single project. So every team really is a unique and discrete business enterprise.
Okay, now before we started talking at the beginning of the show, we had kind of set this up that we're going to talk about standard work. You were actually kind of reshaping that a little bit about not so much standard work as, and what was the term you used?
Fact-based problem solving.
Fact-based problem solving. Okay, so what was before we go into what you guys actually did there at Turner? Obviously something was going on. You felt a need to look at a different way of doing things. So what was kind of your motivation at looking at fact-based problem solving or standard work, that type of thing? What was driving that?
So a lot of factors contributed. If you look at the construction industry is a little unique. If you look at the productivity curves for a lot of other industries, if you go back 50, 60 years, there has been a steady increase in productivity across different industries. If you look at the construction industry, our productivity is flat or might actually be tilted down a little bit over the last 50 years. We're always looking for ways to make our business better. The more efficient we can be, the more value we bring to our customers, which means we're able to deliver products in a faster and more economical manner. So we started working with the Lean Enterprise Institute and Jim about I think it's almost 6 years ago now, we're trying to improve how we go about building our buildings and how we go about managing our processes. Along the way, we started looking at the concept of standard work, and then how does that really apply in an industry that's as variable as the construction industry? Because again, if you have a manufacturing center, you have the same employees who build the same product in the same location every day until they retire. At a construction site, you might not have half of the same employees on January 1st of 2020 that you had on your job site in 2019. So there's a remarkable degree of turnover. So we said, really, what are the things that we can really hang our hat on to get started to bring a little more predictability to our construction process? So one of the things we do in construction, we build a building, and then we have a process at the very end, and we call that process punch list. We tell the owner that we're ready to be done. The architect and the engineers come in, they evaluate the installation, and then they develop a list of, I'm going to call them defects that need to be corrected before the client takes ownership of the building and moves in. The shorter the punch list, the faster you're able to get a project completed, and the sooner an owner is able to take custody of their building. Historically, this has been kind of a haphazard process. We wanted to go about the process a little differently at the office building we referenced earlier. We said, okay, how can we shorten our punch list time, and how can we start really managing our installation so we have fewer defects at time of turnover by getting ahead of the curve very early on in the construction process. Now, we always tell our clients that we have a very rigorous QA QC process. Shop drawing review, material selection, a lot of mock-ups, a lot of first installation inspections. But when it gets into the details of how we build it, time is a huge crunch. There are always a lot of changes on our projects. It introduces chaos into the process. It makes it a little difficult to have a nice, smooth construction process. So we said, what can we do differently on this building that we haven't done in the past? Can I share some graphics with you, Dirk?
Yeah. Show me.
All right. So one of the things we did very early on, the building that we're talking about is a 50-story building. We're ripping the exterior wall off the building, we're removing the exterior wall from the building, and we're doing a new installation of the exterior wall. We're also repositioning the lobby and upgrading the infrastructure in the building. We said after the first 8 floors were completed, where were we having the most problems, and what can we really focus on for the next 42 floors to kind of take some of the variability out of the process and reduce the defects as we go. So bear with me for just one moment.
Okay, so as you're bringing up that slide, so what you were doing is you went out there and kind of, what are our biggest problems? Let's identify our biggest problems, and let's start with one of those and apply this process to that.
That's exactly what we did. We said, instead of going out though and saying, well, I think we have a lot of problems with our exterior wall or with the painting, if you look, follow the red pointer, we went and we took the first 5 floors and we actually broke all of our punch list items down into categories. And one of the things that really jumped out at us was we had almost 2,500 punch list items, but half of them had to do with touch-up painting for our curtain wall installation or our exterior wall installation. We said, well, if we can just focus on reducing the number of scratches on our curtain wall, then we're going to take 50% of our punch list items off the table immediately, and that's going to give us more time to focus on other more important things. It's going to mean the subcontractor is going to have to come back, and they're going to have to do less corrective work, and everyone's going to have a more successful outcome, and we're going to have a higher level of predictability with our turnover dates. So I'm going to share with you one of the first things we did. We went out and we did an evaluation. A typical bay on this building has five curtain wall panels. We took 4 bays and we overlaid them. So this panel right here represents 4 panels. This one represents 4 panels. So it's an aggregation of 20 panels that span from a column here all the way over to a column here. And we've just marked where we were seeing issues with the curtain wall installation.
So the X's represent where there were scratches or mars or something in the curtain wall, right?
Correct. An X is a scratch, and the scratch is on the surface perpendicular to the glass, and a black X represents a scratch on the surface that's parallel to the glass. If you see there's some O's over here, those actually represent dents. So we've got dents and scratches. One's a slightly more severe situation. But we really didn't know what we had, so we wanted to go out and first, let's accumulate some data so we can make an intelligent assessment as to what we need to go after really to fix. So in these 4 bays, we had 140 defects or scratches. So the next step that we undertook, because now that we had clues as to where the damage was occurring, we said, okay, why don't we look at the work going in, so maybe we can figure out how the scratches are actually getting onto the curtain wall panels. So the first thing we noticed was we were using hand trucks. Sorry.
Well, and actually, while you're setting that up, let me ask you something here, or maybe Jim, you can chime in. So, in order to determine where these scratches and mars were coming from, you basically must have had supervisors or yourself actually go out there and watch what was being done. Jim, this is kind of like our going to the Gemba kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Actually, that's exactly what we did. If I may just jump in, we went to the Gemba, but we, well, go ahead, Jim. You want to take this, or you want me to continue?
Well, so just really quickly, in the previous slide up in the right-hand corner, there was a name of a couple of supervisors who were largely responsible for doing the groundwork. And the most remarkable thing for me was, we talk about going to the Gemba and seeing where the problem is, and that in no way was standard work for them before. But once Charlie got them to go out and take a look at what was going on, they very quickly realized that it wasn't just going out to stare at somebody, it was going out to interact with them. And he'll cover that more in a little bit. The thing that was most remarkable to me is the first meeting that I attended, Randy, who ended up kind of shepherding this process. Initially, he was sort of able to describe what was going on, but by the end of the project, by the end of this experience, he was not only an expert in what he had done, but he actually now understood something which I don't think he really had before, which is he had total comfort with the problem they were dealing with, how they dealt with it, and the outcome, which meant he understood the narrative of the problem, and then he could describe it. It was remarkable that his personal presentation style entirely changed during this process, because he was allowed to become comfortable with a given problem, which gave him more comfort as a professional. So after that, I'll step back and let Charlie take it.
All right, interesting. So Charlie, what did they find then?
So we found a few things, but I am gonna back up just a little bit. We had been doing up to this point, I would say, some experimentation with A3 problem solving, and we had been this had been ongoing in our business unit for about 9 months. We had senior level managers who took to it immediately, and we had senior level managers who really pushed back. I think the way we presented it to our people internally, here's a piece of paper, it's got a fancy name, there's a lot of Japanese terminology associated with this process. A lot of people, they kind of resisted because it was new and it was a thing. So when we went out and engaged Randy Castillo, who at the time was less than a year with the company, right out of college, we didn't use any of the terminology, but we just asked him to identify where we were having problems, quantify it, and then please go out and look at the work. We didn't use words like Gemba. We didn't use terms like A3 problem solving. We just asked him to go out and look at the work. And this is what he came back with. He said, well, based on the heat map that he put together before, that was the first thing he did, was figure out where the damage was occurring. We started to see things like the hand truck that we used to carry these 2,200 pound curtain wall panels on had a raw metal edge, and that was rubbing up against the curtain wall panels.
Ah, sure.
This might be a clue. Now over here, you can see, now this is our building. We're looking out the window. This panel is one of the, remember we saw 5 panels before? This is one of the 5. This weighs about 2,200 pounds. There's 2 guys upstairs assisting with the set. This panel is getting ready, and there's a fin on the outside. Well, this fin is being staged directly on top of the panel. This is common practice. I would say these installers aren't doing anything any differently than any other high-rise around the country. It's what they've always done, but we were starting to look at this with a much more critical eye.
Interesting.
Then we started looking at how we're, so there are some pieces that have to get snapped into place. There's no screws for these. It's actually a snap cover. Well, to fasten these covers on, they were using a vise to snap the covers on. Again, if you notice, we had some dents and scratches on the face of the curtain wall mullion that was parallel to the glass. Now here, if you look on the far right-hand side, we're knocking 2 panels together. That's actually a rubber mallet that they're using to snap the 2 panels together during installation. When you look at this in the context of the heat map, you say, oh my goodness, no wonder we're getting all these scratches.
Right.
Now here, we're lifting a panel up, and you can see a guy cranking on a chain fall. Well, that chain fall is awfully close to a vertical mullion.
Right, it's rubbing against it, yeah.
It's rubbing against it. So now when you go back to the slide that we were looking at before, you can start to see we've got things here from fins. We've got damage here due to the clamps.
Right.
We have a nexus of low X's, and that kind of lines up with where the come along is.
So when you go out there and you watch what's going on, you're really able to make sense out of this map. It's like obvious where these are coming from, and I don't want to speed you up too much, but so once you realized where what was causing the problem, you were able to go out there, you're able to see it, you're able to identify the problem. What was the next step?
So this is where this young man who at the time was 23 or 24 years old. He did something that was extremely mature, and actually I think it took a lot of guts. He went out and got a bunch of local 580 iron workers and brought them into a conference room and sat them down and said, "Hey guys, we're having a lot of damage to the curtain wall panels, and we're not here to yell at you. We're here to ask your advice. You guys are the experts at installing curtain wall panels, and if I show you my map, can you tell me how we might be able to reduce some of these scratches?" So they sat down.
That is mature.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
It's brilliant in its simplicity. So they came up with a bunch of strategies to help reduce the scratches. And this is an aggregation of 4 more bays or 20 panels. Before we had 140 scratches, now we had 36, a 74% reduction in damage to the curtain wall panels.
Wow, wow, that's pretty amazing. Well, let me ask you. You touched on something here. You mentioned the maturity of that guy, and Jim, you've worked in a lot of different industries as well. But maybe let Charlie answer this. Within the construction industry, particularly on a large site, you've got a lot of different trades, you've got a lot of different unions involved, and when it comes down to pointing out problems and, hey, you guys should do this, you should do that, it is kind of a tight wire, a tight wire act, a tightrope act, I would imagine. So, he handled it the right way, but how do you teach people going forward that, hey, once you've identified a problem, there's a way to approach solving these problems and getting people on board with it other than trying to do, top down, which you can't probably do in many environments anyway, particularly a job site?
Well, this was interesting because Randy had a whole new set of tools in his toolbox. I would say 10 times out of 10, if somebody who's in the business even 5 or 6 years walks up to a tradesperson and just says, "Hey, you're doing that wrong.
Right.
You need to do better."
Yeah.
You're not going to get a big hug.
No.
So what Randy did was he went out and he sat down and said, "Look, I've been watching you work. I don't have the answers, but I do know that when we do the curtain wall installation on this project, we're scratching the curtain wall. So I don't have the answers, but I'm coming to the people that are the experts, and I'm asking for you to help me solve this problem.
Yeah.
And that's how he got the outcome. So the moral of the story is Randy a special case? Absolutely. However, we've now taken this approach and we're running the same experiment with 3 other young people on another project, and we're getting a similar outcome. They go, they watch the work, there's no snap judgment. It's extremely objective. There's no subjectivity whatsoever. It's not, you're not doing a good job. What you're doing is you're saying you're installing a door frame and 3 out of your 5 door frames are not plumb. How can we avoid that in the future? You're installing ductwork, and the ductwork installation is not complete in 17 out of the 85 places. Can you please explain how we can improve going forward so we don't leave work incomplete behind us? So now you're engaging the workforce, you're actually respecting them, and you're asking them how they can make the whole process better.
And Jim, I mean, it's funny. Charlie just used a kind of a key word. Key word there is respect for people. I mean, that's one of the hallmarks of Lean and the Toyota production system, right?
It is. It's never been one that we've been particularly good at implementing. And the reason is, as we alluded to in the early part of the conversation, there is a fundamental difference between high variation and low variation environments. Our overall goal is always to reduce unnecessary variation and then to incorporate or even exploit variation that just happens as part of the project. When we get stuck in chaotic environments, we get very used to a certain degree of crazy, and then we think that it is inevitable. So part of what we've been doing at Turner is saying, okay, there is going to be a lot of churn in these projects, but a certain percentage of that churn is solvable. That we can come up with standard work to solve that, and we will be solving that largely by engaging other people. So the action of instantiating respect for people comes from exactly what Randy was doing, is going out and saying, as installers, I respect your professionalism. I would like to have your professionalism meet my professionalism and have us solve this problem together. Just kind of to tie a bow on that, what we've noticed repeatedly is that there was always an assumption that the contractor and the subcontractors would always have kind of a tense relationship. What we found is even for some of the tensest historic relationships, the moment that you start to work together on a problem, respect grows out of that naturally.
Yeah. Guys, we're going to have to wrap up here, but I want to give you both kind of a chance for a last word. So I guess Charlie first. I mean, you've been doing this for a while now, and what are you still learning as you go forward implementing fact-based problem solving?
So Dirk, yeah, I've been doing this for 31 years with Turner, and everything has been a lot looser in the past, but for the past 2 or 3 years, the more objective we're able to make any problem, the more data we're able to accumulate, the faster we're able to get to a solution. And what we're finding is the solutions that we get to are better solutions. They're solutions that don't require us to go back and resolve the issue over and over and over again. We're not putting Band-Aids on things. We're actually getting to the root cause of an issue and resolving something once and for all. So the more data we're able to get, this is a classic case of go slow to go fast, then the better the answer and the better the outcome.
There you go. And Jim, working with a construction company, have you learned anything in this process and in working with Turner that you think is maybe something that can be applied back to maybe the manufacturing industry? Maybe some lessons learned that that kind of surprised you, that you see different applications for?
Well, yeah. So I guess there's a couple things. One, I have never walked onto a Turner job site or into the building without learning something. It has been a very very rewarding couple of years that we've been working together. One of the notions here is that on a traditional assembly line, even when there's variation in the specifics of a product that's going to come off that assembly line, we tend to treat workers and stations as static objects that we can improve or whatever. Whether it's in software development or whether it's in construction or insurance or anything, when you get into knowledge work, quality doesn't come from the definition of what happens in a single point. It comes from creating collaborative systems where multiple people can kind of watch simultaneously to make sure that something is going to come out in a quality way. So for Randy's situation, Randy could have come up with all sorts of hypotheses from his position as, even though those other people had more experience, he was in charge. Right. He could have come up with all sorts of edicts and dictates about what they should do, but the quality came from the interaction. And as one of the companies that we've had some contact with is Blue Origin. And one of the things I loved about Blue Origin is they have this massive 3D printer that prints things in titanium.
Right. Nice.
And so they can literally on the fly make changes to engines, engine parts, you know, any part of the superstructure of the spacefaring vehicle. Our notion on the shop floor of what our jobs are as individuals is currently radically changing. And we can't keep assuming that thing A happens before thing B happens before thing C, because that's just not the nature of things. So collaboration equals quality.
There we go.
And the sooner that we're able to incorporate that into the manufacturing process, that might be where we might see some real change.
That's awesome. Great way to tie it up. All right, Jim Benson, CEO of Modus Cooperandi, and Charlie Whitney, Vice President and General Manager of Turner Construction Company. Thanks for joining us. That was a great discussion. I really love what you guys are doing there at Turner. That sounds really interesting. I love the approach. It's really good.
Okay, thanks, Dirk.
Sure. So that is it for today's Quality Digest Live. As usual, if you have some ideas or who or what you would like to see on the show, let us know. Send those ideas to qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we will try to bring those people or those things onto the show. And that is it for today. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next week. So long.